Hey everybody, it's Gil here with the sailing vessel Dream Chaser, and we are actually doing a boat repair video today. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. We'll see you first thing in the morning, back on this. Well, good morning. It's the next day, and last night I did come out here and just did a little bit of trim work. I cut these pieces off. Let me show you what it looks like here. These were the pieces that were hanging on the sides here, and I just took a knife and I ran right along the edge and pulled them off. And then before I went to bed, I did come in and just take some torn glass mat. I'll show you this in a second. So it looks very, very scrappy like this. And I placed that over this back edge so I had a nice curve along the back side. And now I just need to put another piece right on the top. And when you want to blend two pieces in together, again, I don't care how much this part really, how well this looks, because it's going to be glued inside of that fiberglass portion of the boat. But, you know, may as well practice good habits. So I'm going to take a piece of fiberglass, I'm going to cut it to this shape, I'm going to cut it slightly oversized, and then I am going to tear it. What I don't want is a good, strong, solid edge. Instead, we tear these. Here, here's a good example. You can see here this tight edge, and if we instead pull it, it gives me all these fibers, which I can then blend into the piece next to me and around these corners real easily. I'm just going to go ahead and get a layer on here so it can start drying, and then I'll be able to sand this up, and we should be ready to mark where the holes are going to go so I can drill out the wood from the center of it and fill all that with epoxy. Alright, so we've got our piece cut, and as I mentioned before, what we want to do is we want to blend this over the sides. So you see I cut it oversized, and I'm now just using my hands to sort of tear it, if you will. If you grab it between your bent finger and your thumb, you can just sort of feel some of the glass break and begin to pull out of the weaving. That's exactly what we want. So I think we have that. I'm going to clean up my mess here before we start going. With our surface all cleaned up, it's time to get a little bit of epoxy. We'll mix it up and we'll get this piece put back on. I am going down the sides again because what I want to do here is blend those sides down, if you recall. It's been a few hours and we are completely dry at this stage, though these little edges are sharp. So I'm going to take my sander with an 80 grit sandpaper on it. I'm just going to give this a quick light sand around the outside, mainly just because I want to get this so I can handle it a little better. And then I'll start working on getting this a little bit smoother, and I'll show you how we will find the location for the through bolts. We're going to over drill a hole in them all the way through the wood. We're then going to fill that with thickened epoxy so that when that dries, we can then drill a hole just the width of the bolt. That way, if water were to intrude along that bolt, it would never actually make contact with the wood, which could potentially rot. It'll be essentially a thickened epoxy 1.5 inch thick plug, and water would not get outside of that. So let's get this cleaned up. Over here. Yeah, right here. Hey, do me a favor. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more like it, subscribe to the channel and click on that little bell notification so you get notified of new videos. Thanks. So now it's just a matter of marking where the holes will go for the actual motor mounts, and we're going to do that by leveraging a template that I will cut out and use the old transom to poke holes down through the cardboard template. I'll lay that on here, mark where the locations are, and then again, this is a you know, I don't know, a 3/8 inch bolt or so, or 1/2 inch, whatever it was. I will actually drill these holes about 1.25 inches in diameter and fill those with epoxy. There'll be 4 of them. Ideally, it would be best if I could drill the hole through all the wood but leave the back skin on it. I don't know that I'm that good. So if I drill all the way through, I'm not overly worried about it. I will end up putting a little bit of duct tape on the back side of it, filling it with epoxy, peeling the duct tape off, and then if I want, I can add a little bit more chop strand and thickened epoxy and then sand the whole thing flat again. And I'll do that on both sides. I just dry fit this in the dinghy. It looks like it's going to fit perfect. I even turned it around and looked at the holes that are drilled through the fiberglass portion of it, and they line up almost exactly with my X's. So that is good news. I also stopped and picked up a couple of different fillers. I went ahead and got the 406 filler. This is This is going to be for thickening the epoxy to make the larger holes in here. And then I went ahead and bought some 407 low density fairing compound. This is to mix up at the end and put that light coat I was talking about over the top. We won't use this right away. The next step is I'm going to drill a hole 1 inch in diameter at each of these holes here. I'm going to try not to go all the way through, but I may, and if I do, so be it. I'm going to do that off camera because I don't want to do it here. I'm actually going to do it out over a trash can in the backyard, just because I don't want all the sawdust and everything else to get right here. This area is kind of cleaned up and ready for mixing epoxy. 2 of them did go all the way through. 2 others I was able to get right to the skin. Again, I'm not too worried about that because what I'm going to do is on the back side of these, I'm just going to tape these up. This is going to keep any of that epoxy from coming all the way through. We are now ready. I'm going to go ahead and open up my 406. This stuff is a very light powder. So we're going to keep this closed up for now, and we'll start mixing some epoxy. Now time to add some of our 406. Now I'm going to do this a little bit carefully here. I know I'm going to need more than that, but I'm going to just mix this in. Kind of like if you've ever mixed up a cake batter, right? Sometimes it's easier to add the flour a little bit at a time. No different here, and we don't want to breathe this stuff in. I should be wearing a mask, honestly. Because this powder is ground silica, very fine, it could easily get in your lungs if a cloud of this stuff comes up, so wear a respirator. It's the old saying, do as I say, not as I do. Perfect consistency now. All right, so now we're just going to start putting this stuff right into the holes. I'm going to start with one and just work my way around. You see now why this tape is so important. When you thicken it like this, you have to sort of scrape it off the sides of the dispenser stick. Another great trick for doing this is you can put this in a little baggie and cut the corner of the bag and kind of pipe it in like you would cake icing or something like that. Now we're just going to rotate this right around and get these pulled off of there, but look at the size of those plugs. I'm going to have a lot of sanding to do. Let me go throw this away. We'll let this cure. We'll be back in a little bit. I went ahead and put another layer of epoxy on this, sanded it all down, and now I'm dry fitting. I'm about to 5200 it in there. And then I was talking about fairing the outside of this. I'm not 100% sure I will. It's pretty darn smooth for where it's going to be located. So I think it's going to be sufficient. But I dry fit it right inside of here. And you can see on the back, I've marked the holes where this through bolts through the transom. So I'm going to go ahead and drill through these. And then I'm not going to bother drilling the bottom ones until I get the actual motor mounted on there. That way I know they're in exactly the right spot. The beauty of this is it is right in the middle of my plug. So what I wanted to do, which was not expose any water that could go through the bolt to get to the wood, is exactly what I've accomplished here. So this is wonderful. I wouldn't say they're 100% centered, but they are absolutely good for what we need to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and drill these holes out on the top, and then I'll put the bolts in and use these clamps to hold it in place with 5200 while that dries. I initially thought about epoxying this in here to make it one piece, but I decided that if for some reason I ever do need to get it out of here, and 5200 by all means is like the devil's juice, but for things under the water line, it's the right bedding material. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It'll be easy to apply with the caulk tube around the sides of this as well. So first we're going to glue it onto the surface, let it dry, and then I'm going to come back and fill around the sides so that this whole thing becomes one integrated piece to this new transom. So now it's just a matter of drilling a hole that has the same diameter as the bolts that'll through bolt here. So I did decide to do a little bit of fairing on this, and it definitely is nice and smooth now. I'm going to go ahead and get this mounted. So I know where I'm going to put the 5200 on here. You can see that I have a section where it'll adhere along the edges, but not in the center. So I'm going to put it in place, and I'm going to draw a line around it so I kind of know where to apply 5200 on the back of this and on here. And then I'll ultimately clamp it in place. I've got my section, so I know where to 5200 on the back of this. I've got my 5200, my caulk gun, and my little tip here. All right, there goes nothing right into this goop. All right, I pulled the bolts back out of there mainly because I don't want this 5200 to adhere to them. The clamps are all holding it in place. You kind of see I put tape on the bottom. It's hot enough out here that that stuff's starting to run a little bit, and this thing is at an inverted angle. Hopefully that's going to keep any from running out of there, but I'll cut and clean that up. Once that layer hardens and this is adhered in there, then in the morning I'll get this in the shade when it's cooler, and I'll finish filling this in and finish off the edge with the next tube of this stuff. So we're going to let that dry.
We're back at the dinghy. It's actually been a full week elapsed since the last scene you just saw. And that's because the 5200 I bought was the regular 5200, which has a 5 to 7 day curing time. But we weren't able to do a whole lot until that cured in. So I did come out here yesterday, I touched this up a little bit, added a little bit more 5200. What's interesting is I had smoothed all of this down. The 5200 does swell a little bit as it cures. It's interesting, I actually didn't know that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean up some of this 5200 that's along the edge of the fiberglass here and along this outer edge, and then I'm going to go ahead and paint this morning so that way tomorrow it will be dry enough that I can get the motor mounted on here and we'll give this thing a test. Now let's just do some cleanup here.
Get us all nice and smooth. Time to get us a little paint on here.
So I'm using an Interlux Bright Side white paint for this.
And I'm not even bothering to roll it on because of where it sits. I just want something that has a nice coverage to it. That's pretty good. I'm going to start with this outer edge here. I was so ready to go ahead and get this transom finished. I actually forgot to hit record on the camera while I was mounting the motor on it. So I drove it back over here to the house, to the driveway, brought the motor over to it, we mounted it on there, I drilled the holes through the transom, right through those epoxy plugs we made earlier. We bolted the motor on, and all it was left is to take it out for a test run. So at the water, and we'll give this thing a shot. Well, we're taking it out for a test run, and as you can see, I'm idling out of a channel here out into the harbor. Things look pretty good. Everything seems to be working just fine. I figured I'd record this while I'm going slow before I get on it and start bouncing around in the harbor in an inflatable with my cell phone in my hand. So, hope you guys found this useful. We will see you next week on another episode with Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser. Bye, y'all. Safe and happy sailing.